All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Unqork's Twitch stream. Round three, coming at you on a regularly scheduled programming at Thursday, 3 p.m. Eastern. Actually, every other Thursday, but we're going to try to get this to you every single Thursday going forward. So stay tuned on social media to see, us promoting that more frequently so we can, get out to you as much as possible. And today, I'm excited to announce I have a special guest to join for the stream. Roberto Busó-García. He's a director of engineering at Unqork. And Roberto, why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Absolutely. First of all, thank you for having me, Nick. This is very exciting. Sounds like a lot of fun. And hello, Twitchverse out there. Excited to share some Unqork goodies with you all. Yeah, I've been in Unqork for around 3 years. I've done quite one of the many powerful things about Unqork is that it allows you to grow and explore and innovate. And I'm living proof of that. I've been in production support. I've been an engagement lead. Working with clients. I've built applications, I've designed applications, I've led teams that do both, and I love all of it. I'm originally from Puerto Rico. I have originally a background in film, and then I went into tech, and for the last 3 years I've been on Cork, loving it. Thank you.
Cool. Yeah. So as Roberto said, he's from Puerto Rico, and so I've always tried to keep my backgrounds and my attire a little bit on theme too. So today, since Roberto is Latino in tech, while I might not be myself, I absolutely have a great fondness for Latin culture. I've met some of the greatest people and had some of the greatest experiences down in Latin American countries. So today I'm repping my Mucho Amor t-shirt, which is an employee resource group here at Unqork. So Roberto, if you could, why don't you tell the folks a little bit more about what Mucho Amor is and employee resource groups in general at Unqork?
Absolutely. So Mucho Amor is one of our ERC groups in Unqork. It focuses on Latinx people in tech, and that's in a nutshell. We try to strengthen and grow our already fairly pretty amazing diversity, equity, and inclusion culture on Cork, focusing mostly on how can we get even more representation of Latinas and Latinos in tech, both in on Cork and through our partners and elsewhere in the tech world. And besides that, it is a safe space for people to come together, get to know each other, grow together as professionals, and it's a lot of fun.
Cool. Yeah, because look, Unqork is obviously out there trying to change the world of software development. And I think we can all admit that that isn't going to be done by technology alone. It takes people and a whole lot more than just technology to change the world, whether it's software development or otherwise. So we're really proud of what we're doing here, and want to make sure we get that shout out in this episode. So, but moving on to the meat of the content of today's episode. So thus far, I've been talking to you a lot about building in Unqork, showing you the capabilities to build a workflow, to build a module, to build something that connects to APIs. But as we all know, building is just a piece of the puzzle of software development. So today we're going to focus on something called the UDLC, which is, basically helps you with all the other things that go into building. So, once again, I'm going to kick it to you, Roberto. And why don't you tell us a little bit more about, what the UDLC is and what we're going to see today?
Yeah, absolutely. So the UDLC stands for the Unqork Development Life Cycle, and it's a set of tools that provide visibility and governance into what creators build in Designer. We shine lights into all those processes that happen in the back end. We help you plan your applications, maintain them. We help you troubleshoot and debug as you build after the fact, etc. We also provide, holistic looks into the health of the environment, the application modules, configuration quality and analysis. We also have a set of testing tools as well. And what's really, really cool about this, that all of this is built with Unqork. It is the UDLC toolkit is yet another testament of the power of no code, where you can actually have a platform build itself. For a host of reasons that I'm sure you've already started covering in your other episodes, and some of which we're gonna highlight on today.
Yeah, cool. Obviously, we're showing you lots of features of Unqork through all of these switches, but one of the reasons why we're really digging and drilling into to the UDLC is, again, as Roberto said, because it's built with Unqork. And, you know, I've mentioned the codeless architecture on a couple of these. You've seen more literature about that going out there. Unqork's open specification around codeless architecture. And it's because we have that we're able to build these capabilities of the platform on top of it. Because we have that open specification, because we're putting that open specification and representing it inside of Mongo. And, you know, thank you, MongoDB, for the retweet today. But it's that technology, that JSON document-based, you know, database that is the backbone of Unqork that allows us to capture your business logic and everything else in that structured form to enable, you know, folks like Roberto and his team and all the other people using Unqork to glean the insights and the information that we're going to show you. So, you know, just wanted to throw that out there. So that being said, let's dive into one of them. I think it's what, API docs first, Roberto. So why don't you tell us a little about API docs?
Yeah, so sure. So in Unqork, building an API is as easy as creating a module, following some pretty basic steps. And the API tools are like, well, the specs. Let's talk about the specs first. This Unqork API specs allow the Unqork platform, as well as the Unqork creators, which is what we're talking about today. It allows them to discover and understand the capabilities of a service without requiring access to the source config, to additional documentation or inspection of the network. Think about something like the Open API spec, right? And by following the standard, our API modules then are automatically discovered and documented, providing deeply valuable insight to those building in or with your application. So it's not only for you, but it's for everyone else that may be helping out. And we'll be talking about that more in a little bit.
Yeah, exactly right. So you said Open API, Swagger. If you're a developer, you better be documenting your APIs and your code in general, right? Next time you come in, you want to remember what you did. You want others to know what you did, and definitely if you're connecting to an API, you've got to understand how to do it. And we have these specifications. The technology industry has these specifications for writing code, and we don't want it to be any different in Unqork, right? So I do think that was, to me, it feels like a big inspiration for this, and allowing your creators to do the things that any developer would expect to do when they're building a mission critical API.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. All right, cool. So why don't show it. Let's dig in, man.
Let's take a look at what this is all about. Okay, so I'm here in Unqork, designing workspaces. I've come into my workspace and an application called demos. But first, I want to show how we get to the UDLC toolkit. Up here in the settings dropdown, the very first option is the UDLC toolkit, which will take you to our toolkit. After I log in, you're gonna see now the whole set of tools, and as you see, we have organized them by the phases: plan and design tools, which we're going to be talking about. Some of them I'm going to talk about today. The build and test tools that include our testing suite, our deploy tools. How do you release in Unqork? That's for another day. It's a fun one. And some of our maintain and operating tools. We include our monitoring tools and ways to update submissions, etc. But let's go into the API docs tool right here. I'm going to go into config and I'm going to show you, but first I want to show you what the end product is. And the end product is a dashboard of all your APIs that shows the namespace, the title of the API, the ID, and the path to get to that API. And if you click on any of these, then it will give you the details of those, the actual documentation of the API, but we're going to get there in a second. I say, Nick, maybe, I don't know. Let me see if this is a terrible idea. Should I just build an API and sort of walk through this with that? Should I do that?
Yeah, look, I think, what I love about this is it's all real time, right? You build an API, the documentation comes directly from the module that you've built without having to go document it somewhere else, right? And then it's just immediately available to people. So I think that's what's awesome about this. So why don't you show us, build an API and bam, you've got your docs.
Let's do that. Okay, so to create a new module, we click here. Let's call this, since I come from film, let's call this the film crew details API. Yeah, this is an API that that will create a, oh no, that create a submission. Let's say field, like let's create submission, create film crew submission API. This will create a submission with details of people in a film crew, let's say. Now it's as easy as tagging this as an API. That's how the that's part of the feature, right? Once you tag it as an API, now this module will be read as such. That's step one. Here we go in to the brand new module. Now, what you want to do next, well, what I do next at least, is that I go to settings and I make sure that server-side execution only is marked, so that for security reasons, that this module cannot be viewed in Express and can only be accessed by designer users via the backend. Also, please notice that I've enabled RBAC for this module. For this demo, we're not going to go into RBAC, but also a key thing to do for the API modules. Now, going back to the module editor, here in snippets, we actually have a very handy API specifications template already. And what I do is I bring out the panels inside the information panel outside so that we don't have overhead here. And I'll go through what these panels do one by one in a minute. This is just this panel I'm going to remove because it just explains what the template does, which is pretty much just like help you with the API specs. So let's remove that.
Yeah, think about, we're just talking about auto documentation. Like, when you get a snippet from our marketplace, again, it's got the documentation in it, right there for you. Don't have to go elsewhere. So as you're pulling in this API snippet from the marketplace, you've got it. Just like you're going to be creating the documentation, it's right there for you as well. So.
Absolutely, and I'll show you in a second how quickly this can happen. Let me just. This is an HTML component, which in this case is only for showing in Designer, since this is not going to live in Express. If it were an Express module, this text would show up in Express as well. But this is all. This we're using this so that it's like internal API documentation. So the API that creates a submission storing the details of a specific member of the film crew. Now here in this hidden component, we're going to include what the method of the service is. In our case, since we're creating a submission, we're gonna say it's a post. We put it here in the default value, and let's see. Moving on. The panel request, that's where the requests of the API are going to live. This is where we specify those parameters. Let's say that, let's keep it simple. Let's say that we want first name and last name. So the property ID would be first name. Let's use that for our label to keep things simple. Here in the field tags of the request, you specify the type of the request. It could be string, array, object, booleans, etc. In our case, a name is going to be a string, so we're going to keep it type string. Okay, so and you know what? Let's make it required, right? Like let's say if you don't have a first name, you cannot create a submission for a crew member, right? Last but not least, and this is something I'm very fond of. Let's give some more documentation, some more color to what this parameter is. So here in the notes, let's explain what this is. Obviously, for this, it's kind of self-explanatory. It's the first name, but hey, bear with me, okay? So let's just say this is the crew member's first name. Let's say that. Okay, so now we have first name. I'm a completist by nature, so bear with me for a second. Let's just say last name as well. It's a string. It's good. Let's say it's not required.
Right. I mean, I was gonna say we got like Prince and other one-name celebrities out there, so who knows?
That's right. You don't want Madonna not to be part of your
Exactly.
film.
To boost the box office returns.
That's right. That's right. Cool. So that's the panel request. The panel config, we'll come back to it in a second. This is where the logic goes in. And in the panel response, this is the response. So let's say that what we want, we're going to create a submission. And what we want in response is what? The crew member details. But however, in this case, it won't be a string, right? Because if the submission has more, it's not just going to be a string of data. It's going to be probably an object, right? Because it's going to be like first name Nick, last name Gamble, salary $10. So let's put
Hey.
hey, you know, it's
$10, man. Is that all this Twitch is worth to you? Come on.
So the type is an object. Important here is that this one we need to start the database because we want the response to be persistent and to come back. We want the response to come back from the API. So let me save that and let's add some quick logic to create a submission. First, we're going to use an initializer to trigger the plugin that's going to create the submission. So let's call this, I don't know, initializer init new. And then we're going to set it to new submission because we're not going to send it a submission ID, right? We're not working within the context of a submission in this demo. So what this does is that whenever this is executed, and there's no submission attached to this, this is going to fire. And what is it going to fire? Let's say, let's call the plugin that we're going to create a plugin create submission. And as you've probably seen in other episodes, you put the type to trigger and then the value to draw. Okay, so that looks pretty good. We'll create submission. Now let's create the plugin that's actually going to create the submission. Here, plugin, and we're going to call it plugin plug create submission. Put that as the label. Now here in internal services, what we're going to do is we're going to create a module submission right here, and it says which module. We don't have a module yet. We're going to create a schema module right after this. So we'll get back to this in a second, but we do need to put the inputs. Those are our parameters, our first name, and we're going to map it to inside the data object of the submission to first name as well. And that's what we gotta remember that because that's what we're gonna use in our. We don't have to remember that because we will have it documented in the API. So that's so we'll have the dashboard remember that for us. Another thing we want to do, and we'll get back to this after the schema, is that we want the output to fall on the response component, which is called the crew member details. It's going to come back as part of the raw data of the response. We'll see that in a second. So we're going to replace the value of that component with the response, and that will be our response. So this is an API module. This is the API dashboard. Let's refresh and see if it shows up. It's called Create Film Crew Submission. Let's see. There it is.
Oh.
There it is. Oh, I forgot the namespace. I'll get to that in a second. When you click View Details, you see that in the request, you see the parameters, the types, whether they're required or not, and the comments. I already see immediately I made a few mistakes. Let's correct them. They should be the last name. That's what happens when I copy and paste. And I forgot to add some comments to the response. So let's do that very quickly.
But the great thing is, like, even with that, as you're not even done building the API yet, like the actual logic, and you already have that documentation, similar to how you think about excuse me, test-driven development. Write your tests, then write the logic that gets those tests to work. Similar here, you have the documentation as you're making the logic work, but the structure is there automatically for you.
Absolutely. I mean, it documents as you work. It's great. And you saw also, like, as part of the process, it offers great guardrails. You go there and I saw immediately, oh, I'm missing this, I'm missing that, or I got this wrong in case of this. So many useful aspects. Let's see, let's refresh this. Okay, we can refresh this one in specific. And there it is. You see the changes are reflected immediately. You see the types. The type is an object. Now we have a comment. Up here, what this is, and you see what the method is. This goes to our server-side execution testing tool, and we get to use that in a second. Immediately, you can actually, if we do that now, it will fail because we don't have a schema module attached to it. But that's how you can immediately test it. Once we get to the schema, once we get to creating the schema module.
Cool. Yeah, let's actually transition, to the schema module stuff. It's they're very similar, I think, in a lot of ways in terms of the auto documentation and also just going back to the codeless standard before. Like, this is reading your configuration, right? This is in real time taking what you've built and representing it in a legible manner for a lot of people. Once again, because of that JSON codeless standard we have, giving us the ability to automatically extract it. And I'll let you start working on the schema thing. And just, the schema docs, think of them very similar, right? Documentation of your data models. It's just as important that, I think it is at the very least as important that people understand how to interface with your APIs, how they understand how to interface with the data, what the data means, whether data is necessary to have a valid submission, again, being a record in Unqork. I mean, you might be building ERD diagrams, you might be building data dictionaries. This to me, what you're about to show here, schema docs, I don't want to take all your thunder, but to me, that's kind of the beauty of this here, is to really understand your data, both so once you understand it, and anyone coming new into your project understands it. And again, maybe anyone who's going to go use that API that you're about to create, has another representation of what the data that they're creating really means.
No, absolutely, Nick. Thank you. And just the one thing to note, while I was going ahead on the build, is for the tags, instead of API, we need to tag the schema as schema. And again, that's part of the magic. Once it's a schema, it's tagged as schema. This is treated as a schema module by Unqork. The next thing I'm doing is I'm going to create a panel called panel info. And again, this will be for internal documentation only inside the config. Just pretty much explain whomever lands here immediately get a sense of what the schema is for. And now let's create the fields for the parameters and maybe even more fields that could be in the submission, right? So one of the things that's really great about this is that you can just drag and drop a component with a specific type, and it enforces that type. So the text field we know is a string, so we can happily call this the first name, and we're gonna store the data in the database so that it's persisted once the API hits the schema, in our MongoDB instance. And we're gonna make it required, like in the API, right? Same thing here. Let's. I'm just gonna steal this from the other side. Let's add in as notes an explanation. Let's do the same for last name. It's not gonna happen twice. I forget. There you going back to settings, and now here this is not required, remember. So let's do that. Let's you know, we can add other things, right? Like let's add a number for the salary. We were talking about salaries. We may want to know
my $10 salary.
Well, we want to know if it goes up and down in the your next film, right?
I hope it's at least hourly.
So this will be the current salary. And notice that I'm not using tags. We're going to use tags. I'm going to show you an example for objects and arrays, so that the type is that. But if the component enforces the type, you don't need the tag for type here. Let's so salary. Let's make sure that this is stored in database and it's not required. So that will need, the salary will need to be a number, and there won't be more than 3 decimal points, etc. And last but not least, let's try a hidden component, because we want an array of projects, right? Like let's say that we want to know or to have in the database what the former projects of the crew member did. And here we are going to add type array as a tag, and we can say that this is a list of past projects crew member worked on, something along those lines. Okay. So that is we can do that with many other, let's say the module, with many other like radio buttons, tables, etc. Let's go then to the and now I'm going to use our handy Chrome extension.
When I saw you going tab to tab, I was hoping you were going to end up on the Chrome extension.
Yeah, no, I was like, oh, let me show you the but no, this is incredibly handy. We have a Chrome extension that you click it from any of the environments you're working on, any model you're working on, and it directs you immediately to any of our tools. So out of the box, you have the way of getting it through the settings dropdown. But this is the Schema Docs dashboard, again, very similar to the API Docs dashboard. And let's see if what's the name of the I think film should be in it. There it is. Film crew details, schema, and let's take a look, see what you have. Your label, your property name, the type, it's text. In this case, it's number. Oh, I forgot to persist. You see, the hidden component is not showing the projects. That is probably
right. That's really important, right? Because that is actually what's saying you want to save this data, right? Is that checkbox is enabled.
And most components are set. Some most components, the components that make sense, have a default to store data in database, but for many reasons that we'll go into in some other conversation, the hidden components are not. So that's a good note.
Conversation for another day.
For sure.
We got plenty of Twitch screen. We'll do a whole stream on the hidden component. And it is, I think, our most used component in Unqork.
Absolutely. And here you see it. It's type hidden. Oh, why isn't the type coming up? Let me see. What did I do? No. What did I do wrong?
I think that's right. I think one thing I want to just because we're at about 30 minutes now, I want to make sure we get through app dependencies too. Earlier we were talking about, look, this is obviously, again, right, inspired by data modeling in general, and really having a lot of, again, visibility into your data, but also governance. You mentioned in your intro to the UDLC that this is a lot about the governance, right? And to me, a data model, if there's anything in your system that needs governance, it's your data model, right? People shouldn't be just adding properties on a whim, and and everything like that. So, I think about, a lot of frameworks, or even if you aren't using like a development framework, you might run database migrations, right? And you'll have those migrations, in each deployment, let's say, and you can roll back the migration, you can roll forward migrations. You can also see exactly who committed a migration, who made the migration. And I think, by following this, you get that in Unqork too. So if you could,
Yes,
can you go to a module history of your schema module?
absolutely. That's my next step here. Let's in the schema here. So this is like a change log, like you're saying, right? So we start here when we just, we created it, right? And step by step, that's the first component. Remember the description I created, and so on. Then I added the panel, and then I added the first name, and so on and so forth.
Right. So basically, you see exactly who and when any change to your data model is made, kind of like those incremental migration scripts you may have in other software development paradigms. And then, in that top right, you can restore, right? So kind of almost like undoing a migration is almost as simple as reverting back to a previous version of your data model. So a lot more, I think, that comes when you take this schema approach. The documentation's great. The change log is great. There's so much that goes into it. And I think so you restored it, and then if you went back to the docs, you'd have the newly documented the data model, right?
Yeah, in a second. Yeah, it disappeared, you see, because I restored it. It didn't disappear. It's still there. It's just
right. When you can get right back to it. You can get right back to it if you need it. So
it's awesome.
Right. If you refresh this, it should go away too, right?
Yep. Because it reflects the version, the current version.
No one will ever know that Roberto snuck in a field that maybe he shouldn't have.
That's right. That's right. No one.
So once again, like going back to that codeless standard, all built on top of that structure. So I want to make sure we get into app dependencies, but let me let you take us on that journey.
Yeah. So let me get to that. I think there's one thing I didn't show you that I wanted to show you about here. Oh, so here, view submissions will show you the 50 most current submissions created, and that's the one I just did while Nick was giving more color, and you see that the API works, and that the schema module took you directly to it. Now, app dependencies. Let me go to application dependencies here. It is you can search by workspace or module ID, and it will show you by module the modules that module is executing, or the modules that are imported into it. Let me show you. Let's actually, let's build very quickly a module that calls, our API, and for that, and let me know if I'm out of time, Nick.
No, I think this is going to be a good one here.
So plug API, right? And what we do here is we choose the execute module service, and then we're gonna choose the film API, the create film submission API, and then you would fill out all the like necessary information that we have now that we need for it to work. But where's my app dependencies? Here. So if we take this module ID, the one that I just created, this module ID of the module that's executing it, it should show me the dependencies. There it is. See, this module ID, a dependency of this module is this API because it executes it, it calls it, right? And it gives you the module ID of the title of the module you're looking at, and then the module ID and the title of the module or modules that are dependent on it, and the relationship type. The first one is execute because the parent module is executing the child module. There's a second type, which is if you have an incepted module. And and the way to incept the module in Unqork is you create a panel, and let's call it panel incept, and you import it here. Let's call it import. It's prettier.
I remember the old Inception days.
Yeah, So let's say that, you can choose whatever module. Let's just choose main entry. So now this main entry is going to be part of this module because you're importing it into the parent module. And of course, we would want to know that all those kinds of dependencies for many reasons. Let's load dependencies again, and there it is. You see? Now, but now the relationship type is an imported module. Now, as part of my day-to-day troubleshooting and testing habits, I check application dependencies for the module. Just to remind myself of for me, it's a map. It's a constant map of how everything is linked as I work, as I troubleshoot for sure. Like if we create that API that creates submissions, maybe it's called from 12 places, and you make one change and you want to make sure that it works in all 12 places. Immediately you know where those 12 places are, by using this tool. And there are, I don't know, it's a plethora of examples like that. But it's really a map, and it's an essential way into the relationships created in between modules in Unqork.
Yeah, I mean, that's huge. That's huge, right? Going back to the API part of it, you're trying to build these as reusable elements in your system, right? So you can encapsulate the logic one place and utilize that logic from wherever. But as you continue to have these loosely coupled systems, these distributed systems, it's so important to understand how they're connected to one another. You make a change, where might I have to change the request body of an API call if I've changed the required fields of that API? Maybe you don't want to do versioning and you want to just go backwards and compatible, right? Maybe you need to trace down, like you said, all the different sources. So that data could be coming in, as we continue to move more and more in that way. And I think you're about to show how you can see it in the broader perspective. So I'll just let you do that.
Yeah, no. And for me, I think this is a nice way to wrap it up a little bit because you can, it allows you to track dependencies across workspaces, not only across applications, but across workspaces. So as you see, I just put, 2 workspaces, and it's showing you each dependency for each module, whether it lives within the workspace or not. And like that, you can just include, let's say that you have like 5 workspaces for the project you're working on, each with like 10 applications, each with 20 modules, where this is a great way to immediately know what the dependencies are as you plan for testing, as you plan for, for deployment, for sure.
Huge. Well, great. I mean, I love this. Like I said, this is just the first. You saw the list that Roberto had up of the UDLC, and look, we're going to touch on every feature that Unqork has at some point, but we are going to hone in on these because, again, these are built with Unqork, and we'd love at some point to show you the config that lives underneath and how easy. And actually, I should say though, you can see it yourself if you're inside of Unqork. If you're an Unqork creator, tuned in right now. These live in your application or in your environment, almost like open source. We have open source code. Well, we have open source config. Go in there, see how these things are built, enhance them, extend them. Make them do things that they don't do that you want them to do. They're there for you, and we encourage folks to take on that kind of creativity. Roberto, anything else you want to add about UDLC, any of these tools? We'll show more.
I mean, this is just what you said. This is just the beginning. I mean, it's as you see, we get very excited about this tool. And one of these days, maybe we can go into the config and the actual how were the tools themselves built, and show a little bit of the magic under the hood. But that's for another day. Thank you.
Yep, yeah, because that's what we're here, right? To show you the kinds of amazing things that you can build with Unqork, with no code, and on top of that, code the standard. So thanks again, Roberto, for coming. Thanks everybody for joining in, and at the very latest, we'll see you 2 weeks from today. And like I said, keep an eye on social media. Maybe we'll get back to you even sooner. So take care, everybody.
Bye-bye.